Anthony over there.
Hey guys.
Close big ticket sales. What we're going to talk about today is actually sales and marketing stuff, but something that's been working pretty well for us is actually closing without sales calls. But although we are closing without sales calls, there's a lot of sales principles, marketing principles that we're going to get to as well. But I mean, Anthony, as you know, when you hop on sales calls where people don't know you at all, like you or trust you, it's a much different sale than when people are a little bit more familiar with you, right? So let's talk a little bit about that and how pre-sell, how important pre-selling is before getting on sales calls, and then I can kind of get into how I'm closing without sales calls.
Absolutely. Pre-selling is extremely important, whichever way you do it, whether you're sending them a reference email, a link to your website, or they're going through a nurture sequence before they hop on that sales call. The more they know before that actual call, the more likely they are to be familiar with your process, know how things work, and just be that much more ready to buy.
hmm Yeah, and just kind of adding on to that, I mean, I think a lot of people these days they get people on sales calls and then they kind of do the whole horse and pony. They do the 60-minute sales calls. They crush objections. They block all the objections there, and it's a lot of convincing.
Yeah.
Whereas you've done these sales calls before. How we ran marketing campaigns where you get on these sales calls. It's a very quick and easy sale, right?
Yeah.
And all that comes from being able to be from pre-selling leads and nurturing the leads and making sure that you know they understand that there's a problem, and then once you actually get on a sales call, it's a lot easier to close the deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The sales calls where, you just hop straight from the sign up onto the sales calls, those are the ones that generally 9 out of 10 times I would say don't close on the first call. Now, having a nurture sequence is great, whether it be before the call, whether it be after the call. You just want to have a system where if people aren't ready to make a decision yet, that they can see more information, they can see more about your program, and then they can get more educated on why it would be a benefit to them to sign up with you.
Yep, for sure. And I remember before we even partnered up, you didn't really know too much about cold email. But when we actually started working together and I ran these cold email campaigns, you said that these deals that we brought in were actually a lot easier, right? And the importance of how we made that work was just, sending out cold emails to the right people, uh, showing them, writing good copy that got them persuaded and more pre-sold on the offer that we had. But tell us a little bit about like how those sales calls went compared to ice cold leads.
Yeah, it was night and day. The calls would come on, and we wouldn't even book too many sales calls. And that was the whole
hmm
point there. We didn't need a high volume because we were getting a high quality of lead there. And what that was not only were you emailing them, you were asking them a few questions just to make sure that they fit a certain criteria of client that we wanted to talk to. Then not only that, I remember you sent the video of
Yep.
us going through kind of like a breakdown of what it would be like
Yep.
working with us, so that by the time that client got on the call, not only did they fit our ideal demographic, but they already kind of knew what we were offering and how we could benefit them. And that just made it so much easier to get them to sign up with us. It was just a matter of laying out the price points, coming up with a payment
hmm
plan, and kind of setting a timeline on deliverables.
Yep. And I think that's a secret behind like a good sales process too. When you can do all the heavy lifting before a sales conversation, it's easier to close that sale. And in some cases, you don't even need a sales call. If you do a sales call, great. Usually, it's an easy sale. Like a 2 out of 10 sales call. But something that's been working for us pretty well is actually driving people into you can call it a webinar, but we call it a workshop, so that when you run that workshop, you're explaining your value proposition, how you work, the problems that people have, uh, other methods that maybe they have tried before that didn't work, and kind of persuading people that way, so that when you invite people to get on a sales conversation with you, what we've been doing is having DM conversations. All we do is just drop a Google Doc with the invite, and then it's as easy as that. We send them a payment link, and then they close the sale. We recently just did this for somebody else, and we closed a $4,500 deal. It's a coaching program. We didn't have to hop on any sales calls at all.
Yeah, no. And sometimes the power of just having really good copywriting, having an extremely great offer, and then just being able to answer everybody's questions via text, that can really save you, the struggles of hopping on a call. Now,
Hmm.
is that going to work for every industry? Probably not. But in certain key instances, if you have a good system there and you have a good follow up and nurture sequence, then it's very possible to do. And it could even lead to a massive number of signups for yourself.
Yeah, I would say the big key is actually, I mean, this I would say this works pretty well. We've done it for agencies though, and we've done this for a lot of coaching offers. But the key really is just being able to demonstrate your value uh, through your marketing. So I'd say the key that worked really well for us was when we had the coach or the expert guru hold a webinar or workshop, invited as many people as we could to that workshop, and that way he was able to demonstrate his expertise, and then after that it was again like a very easy sale. So in terms of like niches that work that this works for, I'd say if you're teaching people a skill or anything valuable, this works really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you're able to really hone down on this method of doing sales, then you can really save your time from doing sales calls. And number two, if you're outsourcing your sales to a closer, you can just save an extra 20 to 30% on your commission there.
Yeah. uh, let's talk a little bit about like like the structure of how to hold these webinars or events before getting people to the sales call. And before we even talk about that, actually, if the method that works for us is just closing by DM, but if you do want to send people to a sales call, it just makes the sales call way easier to close, actually. So that's been working for us pretty well. But let's say in terms of marketing, ideally for you, if you're a closer, and I know you close a lot of sales on over the phone, Anthony. Like what kind of things would you want prospects prospects to know about the company before you actually hop on a call with them to make it a lot easier?
Yeah, a huge thing to do after people sign up is you want to send them a link to some sort of video about yourself, an introductory video to your company. In that video, you want to talk about who you are, what you do specifically for X industry, who you work with, and pretty much how a breakdown of how your process works there. I think those three things in a nutshell really gives the person an idea of what to expect on that actual call. And if they're interested, then they'll be that much more excited for the call, and if they're not interested from there, they can opt out right away.
Yeah, and when you can do a really good job at that, it's very natural for them to like want to hop on a conversation with you, know a little bit more about how you work. And let's say if you do get, let's say, 1,000 people on a webinar or live event, a majority of them won't turn into high ticket sales, but the ones who do, they're going to be very pre-sold. They're going to be very easy to sell, and let's say only 10% of them or even 5% of them do end up as clients. That's going to be a lot of good revenue for you. And whether you choose the route of sending them to a sales call or closing by DM, it's gonna be a lot less work for you than hopping on sales calls where you have to convince people over a 60-minute strategy session, convincing them and persuading them, and like having to deal with all the objections.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing I recommend is, and now these are for people that want to close as many deals as possible and they're not worried about saving their time or things like that. Having the funnel is great. It's essential. The people that go through it, they're going to be a lot hotter than the people that don't. But this doesn't mean that you should disregard all the people that don't go through it, because my philosophy personally, our philosophy is that
Hmm.
you should speak to everybody to see who's interested. And some people, they might not want to watch your webinar, but they might go ahead onto the sales call and actually pay. And some people, they might watch your webinar and pay anyways. The philosophy is don't miss out on any opportunity there. And if you're only relying on the hot leads, then you're not going to be very successful in the long run.
Oh yeah, for sure. You actually brought up a really good point there, and it's that, let's say if you do have 1,000 people who register for your webinar, only 40% of them show up. There's still about 600 people that you can follow up on there, and that's where the gold is. It's following up. I know following up with people isn't the sexy thing, but it's the uh, best way to kind of have a business that has longevity in the business. You know, so following up with those leads. How would you personally follow up with those leads that just didn't really watch the webinar though? I mean, they obviously showed interest since they registered though.
My personal strategy is first, if you don't want to, if you're not so much into calling, I would send them a text message or an email saying, hey, once upon a time you signed up for X, Y, and Z webinar. We help individuals do X. I was wondering if you're still interested in this, in us helping you do this, or interested in this offer. And if you're really keen on really just getting as many people as possible, I would go as far as even picking up the phone and dialing them, as long as you do have their phone number and they did consent for you to call them.
Yeah.
Hopping on the call and calling all those people, that's a great way to see who's really interested, you know, what their excuse was, and then really piquing their interest to book them onto a call.
Yep, I think that's the best way as well. If you look for volume, it's really just picking up the phone and following up with those leads. And you can, yes, you can text, but I think the most direct and easy way is to call those leads. So super important to collect phone numbers as well. That's kind of like the basic stuff. You need a way to contact them, but yeah, I think that's a really good way too. I know that there are some people who there's tons of people who hold webinars, but not many of them actually do the follow up and uh, reach out to the leads and follow up the conversation there. And just by doing that, that's gonna add I'd say 30 to 50% of extra revenue for the business.
Definitely. And one thing to keep in mind there, guys, and it's one thing that if you keep this mindset, you'll always have that motivation to follow up with leads. The fact that they signed up to your webinar, your free
Mhm.
offer, whatever it may have been, means they were interested enough once upon a time. So that being said, it's not like you're just asking people, hey, do you want what I have to offer? They raised their hands, they signed up, they gave you their contact details. That means they should be followed up with until at least they book a call with you, or they tell you, hey, I'm no longer interested.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's gonna be levels of interest there. Obviously, the people who watch the webinar in its entirety, they're going to be the best leads. But the people who just registered that maybe didn't watch the webinar, maybe they are as interested, but just things come up, right? So taking control of the outcome there by calling those leads, it's going to be very powerful. You're gonna get more calls on the calendar as well, and obviously more sales.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, anything else you want to kind of add on to here about pre-selling leads and kind of that whole sales process?
Yeah, no, pre-selling is very important here. Some of your fastest deals will be the guys that have gone through your nurture sequence. So I always recommend building a nurture sequence or a pre-sell sequence. Don't get too caught up into it. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make sure you introduce yourself, make sure they know what you're doing in the industry, who you're currently working with, and kind of like what to expect to work when they work with you. If you do those three things, you're gonna have people that hop on a call with a lot clearer expectations. You won't have those calls where people just come on saying, "Hey, like I just signed up. I don't really know what you guys have to offer. Just give me some information, and I'll take it from there."
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of from my perspective as a copywriter, marketer, I'd say the best angle is to identify the problem that they have. So whether it's you're running a webinar funnel or sending emails or posts, what I personally do is I'm driving people into a community or school group, and then the posts that we make are really focused on the problem, right? And I'd say that's the best way of getting people to raise their hand, just identifying the problem that they have, agitating. It's kind of the old school marketing formula that Dan Kennedy has. It's problem, agitate, solution, right? So you want to identify the problem, agitate it, kind of showing them what that problem will look like and for them, and then offering a solution. And that solution is usually inviting them to start a conversation with you over DM, or you can send them to a phone call and kind of go from there.
Yeah, highly effective strategies there. And if used properly, there's no way you can't get more sales calls / sales. So we highly recommend you guys try that method out.
Awesome. So yeah, some good tips there. Thanks, guys. That's it. See you guys later.
Take care, guys.
Hopefully that recorded.
Oh, please tell me that
Just
does.
yeah, I think we did.